Hello everyone and welcome. I'm going to share a couple projects today. I'm coloring with alcohol markers in two different ways. I took a class from Alta Academy called Color Blending with Artist Markers, and truth be told, I do not own any of them, although they are very intriguing to me with the bullet tip on them. But I'm going to use my Copic markers today and show a couple different techniques. I'm going to do some traditional coloring on this first card, and I'll use the Paint a Flower Hydrangea stamp from Alta on actually both of the cards. I'll use the Memento ink, which is alcohol-friendly ink, and I also like to use the Express It blending card. It's bright white, and I feel like it really makes a difference when you're coloring with the alcohol markers. I do like to use my Misty when I'm stamping and coloring with black with the alcohol markers. I can get a good impression if I have to do it a couple times, and I do like a really dark outline. As I mentioned, I'm going to use this stamp for both of my cards, and so after I'm done with the first one, I'll put another piece of the blending card in, and I'm going to move that a little bit because I want it to be a little bit different than the first card, and this is where I'm going to mask that off later on in the video. But I'll do the same and stamp that one a couple times. Like I said, I just wanted that to be kind of off the edge. A little bit of fun information about the class I took. She goes into making a color wheel and talks about complementary colors and also analogous colors. A lot of information that's really useful. On my card today, I'm going to use the analogous colors. They're next to each other on the color wheel. I'm going to start off with the C2 marker and map out my shade and the darkest areas on the stamp. I like to use the gray for underpainting, and then I'll come over that when I'm done with all the areas. I'll come over that with the darkest color. Depending on what color I'm going to use, I underpaint with a complementary color or a gray most of the time, and it really helps to push back those shaded dark areas. I do color dark to light, and I enjoy that. I know a lot of people color light to dark, and it's just fun to kind of try something new. I'm going to start out with the BB17 marker as one of my darker shade colors. I'm going to use the BBs and also some violets to do my darker shade. And I'm coming over the top of that gray marker. So we want to cover that and extend it out a little bit from that. With the technique of flicking over the top, you get a really good blend, and especially if you do it when things are still wet. I want a couple of different hues to my flowers, and so when I'm done with the BB17, I come in with the V17. And even though they're both sevens, the violet looks a little bit lighter because it doesn't have that blue in it. And I wanted some of the flowers to have more of that violet tone to it. I'll then come in with my mid shade color, and I'll use the BB13 and the V06 for that. So the BB13 is going to go over the BB17, and the V06 is going to go over the V17. And the same thing, but now you're going to cover over all the first darker shade you did. And then you'll extend that out a little bit farther. You want to make sure to leave some room at the end of the flower for the highlight, so don't extend it out too far. That's why I like to take one petal at a time, because some do have more shade than others. The ones sitting on top obviously have more highlights from the sun. A little fun art terminology here. The mid shade is actually called the penumbra, and in Latin that literally means almost but not really shade. I've switched now to my lightest markers, and I'm going to use the B15 to go over some of the VO6, but mostly I'm going to use the BB00 to go over most of them. It's a little bit lighter color and it gives more of a highlight. So with the lightest marker, you're going to go over everything. You're going to go over what was dark, what was the mid shade, into the highlight. And that's how you get your really good blend. I usually try and flick away from myself, but with a flower like this, it's kind of small, and so I'll turn my paper and flick towards the center of the petal. For the center of the petals, I'm going to use the YG03, and that marker has a lot of colorless blender that they made with, and when I'm just going to make a kind of a starburst in the center. I want the center to be green, and it'll kind of eat away at the marker that I've already placed down. It gives it kind of a cool halo effect in the center, and you can see the green. Now I'm going to come in and I'm going to start on my leaves. And to do that, I'm going to start again with my darkest color over the gray. And I'm starting with the YG67. And I'm coloring over all of that C2. And just where I think the darkest part in the shade would be again. Now I'll come in with my penumbra, my mid shade, and I'm going to use the YG63 for this. And again, you're going to color over all of that 67 and a little bit beyond that. And I'll do that until they're all covered. Another tip for working with a small image is I like to outline the image sometimes and then flick inwards. And that just ensures that I'm not going to flick outside the line. Especially when you have those really tiny leaves and the stems. I'm going to come in now with my YG03 and fill that in, and again over everything. And that makes the highlight and the white areas that you haven't colored. The YG03 again is one of those markers that just kind of eats things away, so you want to be kind of careful with it. You don't want to go over it too many times. Now that the coloring's all done, I'm going to start figuring out my card. I'm going to come in with some iris colored cardstock, and I'm going to put an image on this. So I'm going to use the Dainty Swiss Dot stamp set. If you've watched some of my videos, you know how much I love this stamp. I just make such a great background for so many things. So I'll place that my Misty, and I'm going to color this with a couple of inks. I decided to use the ultramarine first. I'll stamp that on. And I really wanted to have a more of a violet tone to it. Just kind of that matched tone and tone with my cardstock. So after I do that, I'm going to come in with the hydrangea ink. I thought that was really appropriate. And I'll stamp that on top. So it's kind of fun because it will change the color of the ink. That's just another fun way to get more use out of your inks. You can create all kinds of colors by doing that. I stamped the image on some masking paper, fussy cut that out, and I placed it on the stamp. Now I'm just going to come in with some black wash and flick some paint on that with a small brush. That just adds some interest to the background. I'm going to end up cutting that down a little bit. I'm going to use the stitched rectangle dies from Simon Says Stamp, and I'll use the second largest one to cut out the hydrangea. And the largest one, I'm going to emboss that with the embossing mat on my die cut machine. I'm using my anti-static powder on some black cardstock, and I will stamp the sentiment from the hydrangea stamp set. It says, trust the magic of new beginnings. And I stamped that with a Versamark and embossed that with the pure white embossing pattern from Altenew. The hydrangea image ended up being 3¼ by 4½, about an inch smaller. And I'm going to put some fun foam on the back for some dimension. So I'll just glue that on, and then I'll pop that onto the background. I put this all on a 4¼ by 5½ top folding card base and put my sentiment right in the center of the two flowers. I also added some Nuvo shimmer pen to the center of the petals to highlight those. For my second technique, I'm going to do the no color blending that Yanis Mikula has been doing videos about lately. I've been really wanting to try this. So I'm going to take that mask I used earlier and I'm going to place that on my flower. I want to stamp one of the heads of the flower on the left side, so it's got 3 of them instead of 2. So it looks a little bit different than my first card. So I'll just place that on there. And then I'll place the stamp where I want it. And I'm going to line that stem up on that stamp with the stem on the main part of the flower, so they look like they're connected. And I'll stamp that again with the Memento ink. I stamped that a couple times just to ensure I have a good impression. And I wipe away anything I don't want stamped that mask isn't going to cover. I like to use a Copic 0.1 multi-liner just to fill in anything that didn't stamp good or that the stamping might have missed. I also like to use the sand eraser, and the heat brush comes in great so I don't have to use my hand to brush things off. Technique is a little backwards from how I usually color. You're going to use your lightest colors to color everything in first. So I'm going to use the BV00 and the B63. I want this hydrangea to be a little bit more on the blue side. So I start off with those 2 lighter colors, and literally you're going to color in all the petals solid. I'm changing up some of my colors a bit on this card, but I'm going to color some of them with the 00 and some of them with the B63, just so I have kind of a difference in color on the petals, just like I did before. This is kind of a small image to do this technique with, but I figured I would try it out anyway. So my mid color, my penumbra color, is going to be B13 and B66. So I'll use the BB or the BB00 and the BB66 over the 63. And what you do with this, you're going to just make kind of it's going to turn out really looking very graphic looking. But you want to preserve that highlight with that lightest color, and you're just going to make a line and color it towards the shade part. You can see how that turns out. Just is really fun. It's just no thinking about it, no worrying about the blending, and I really enjoy it. When you make your lines, make sure they're not a straight line. Make them more of an organic curved line, or they could be even a squiggly line, not too squiggly, but more of a curved, especially with a small image like this. I'm going to now use my darkest colors, and I'm going to use the BB17 over the 13 and the B79 over the 66. And I'll do that same thing, but you don't want to follow the same line. You kind of want to have more of an organic look again. And you might want to start, like, as you can see, I kind of start like in a different corner and make my line, my curved line, a little bit different than I did the first one. I'm definitely not an expert at this or even the traditional coloring, but I enjoy coloring, and I think we all need practice to get better at what we do. This technique really has a bold, definitely different look than the other traditional technique, but I think it's really fun. You want to make sure that your colors that you're using in your marker colors are spaced farther apart. You really want to have some contrast between them. And you can see as I do the B79, it's really a blue color, and you can really see it really stands out now. A couple of the marker colors I chose had the hydrangea name in the name of the marker, and again, I thought that was super appropriate. I thought it was meant to be to use those particular colors. I'm going to come in now and do the stems and leaves, and I'll use the YG03 and color all of those in. After I'm done with that, I'll come in with the YG67. Again, it's farther apart and will show some contrast between the colors so you can really see this technique. I found the leaves to be a little bit tricky just because they're a different shape than the petals are, and you just practice to figure out where you want to do your curved line on them. And where more shade would be, you're going to have the darker color. Because they're more elongated, you could have more of a long line on it instead of a rounded line like you do on the petals. I know my hand gets in the way a lot of seeing what I'm doing, but here as I'm finishing, you can see the end result of that YG67. And now I'm going to change things up a bit. I'm going to go to a G29 over the top of that and make my smallest part of the shade. And again, I'm going to make a curve a little bit different than I did the second shade. And I wanted this to be kind of greened it up a bit, and that's why I changed to the G instead of the YG, just for a real difference of color. As I'm finishing up with that G29, you can really see the contrast now between all the colors and how really graphic, and I think it's a really fun look this gives. And so now the coloring is done, I'm going to work on my card, and I'm going to use the brushed grid washi tape from Altenew. And I put a strip of that on my card panel. I've got Nina Solar White 110 pound here. And I put that on with my stencil pal just to make sure it's really flat and smooths out. I'm going to fold over those edges. I actually fold over the little small edges on the long side, but you can really cut them off. I knew I would be okay with this because I was going to glue it down on my card base. I just didn't want to see the sides. I cut the hydrangea panel down to 3 1/4 by 4 1/2, and I'm putting that on some black cardstock that's got an 1/8 of an inch border around, and glue that to each other. I'm going to put another piece of fun foam on the back of this just for dimension. I was worried that brush grid was going to be a little bit too busy because of the bold graphic design on the flower. But because I put it on the black and popped it up, I felt like it really worked. So I'll just place that on there and glue that down, and then I'm gonna come in with my sentiment. Use a sentiment from that stamp set again, and it says, "Let your dreams bloom." I'll put that on some black cardstock again, using my anti-static powder. And the verse mark, I'll pretty much do a similar thing that I did to the first card and stamp it with that and heat set it with the Altenew Pure White embossing powder. I'll place that on the top. I did stack it up with about 3 more cardstock pieces underneath. And then I want to highlight the center of that flower on this card too. So I'm coming in with the Nouveau Crystal drops and just dropping little drops right on top of where that green was. And it really highlighted that. Thanks for joining me and coloring 2 ways with your alcohol markers. I really had fun doing this project. I appreciate you watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive all the notifications when I have a new video. Thanks again. Have a great day.
Don't forget there's only one Thursday, little Friday.